Okay.
Okay, beautiful. Good morning, everybody. Tarryn Reeves, the CEO and founder of Four Eagles Publishing and the Publishing House Concierge. And today I'm joined by the beautiful Diana Kendros, who is one of our authors inside of Phoenix Rising, a multi-author book project. Welcome, Diana.
Thank you, Tarryn. It's so great to be here.
It's great to have you. Now, Diana is the CEO and founder of her Trauma Talk blog, mindset coaching, and her upcoming Trauma Talk podcast. Trauma Talk programs look at how our inner dialogue portrays the way we see ourselves and the world. Diana helps people reshape and redefine perspective in more positive, productive, and meaningful ways. She's an international best-selling author and is celebrated for her signature workshops, coaching programs, and communication strategies. Diana volunteers for the National Alliance on Mental Illness and teaches their education programs to family members, mental health advocates, and medical providers. Diana is certified in Ayurvedic health modalities, wellness recovery action plan, and family trauma peer support. What wonderful work you do, Diana. Please tell us more about your business and how you got into the area of trauma.
Oh, sure. So I teach and coach how unresolved trauma affects us in every area of our life. And I call this really the silent narrative because it's trauma silent narrative, or it's just a silent narrative from any other type of experience that really strikes us in a way that complicates some of our inner dialogue. Okay. Sure. So, and I'm just going to put this in context because this context is, I think, is super important. So in 2008, 2009, I was a very busy businesswoman. I had an international product company and I sold pet grooming products all over the world. We were the first in grocery store as an organic line. And everything got interrupted when my son, at 11 years old at that time, was assaulted and abused by 5 boys that he thought he was safe with. And this whole thing is in my ebook that I give as a freebie, the whole story. But just to make a short story to give you this context, a few days later, he became psychotic. He had a psychotic break. He was hearing things, he was seeing things that weren't there. And it took us a while. It took us a couple of years to get his medication straight, to really understand what was going on with him. At that point, I was not studying mental health or mental health conditions. And so I knew very little about anything. But one thing I did know, because he's a visual artist, is that I knew that if we stayed in this community that we were living in, he wasn't going to survive because he was suicidal. So I took him to a performing arts school up in northern Michigan in the Great Lakes, beautiful area. And he was then able to be kind of with his tribe, other people, other artists, other students, got into great psychiatry. And through the 3.5 years that we were together, I recognized, by caring for him and showing up for him, I recognized that my own trauma was starting to really show again inside of me. I had thought I healed trauma that I had as a child. I had assault as well. And so it propelled me really to revisit this. And I started to do this inner work that helped me to understand what I was literally saying to myself, what this narrative was saying. You know, usually it's about shame and fear and insecurities and inept and those things that happen with any kind of traumatic event. And so trauma is on a spectrum, you know, it's mild, moderate to severe. And it's just like mental illness or any mental health condition, it's on a spectrum. And that spectrum is fluid. So you can think that you're in a mild state and end up in a severe state pretty quickly, like what happened to my son.
Yeah.
And so because my son was a traumatic event, the brain shifted, the chemistry in his brain shifted to cause this psychosis. So we were doing everything we could to help him not move into a schizophrenic type of brain or bipolar. And so I did a lot of work then, working with the National Alliance on Mental Illness and understanding how if I were to educate myself and really know his condition, I could help him. Very different experience than I had when I was growing up as a child. I didn't have the support. that I
Yeah.
gave myself. And so I was able to show up as a strong mother to help him. And so I just wanted you to have that context because I gave up everything. I gave my home, my business, I dropped everything. I had 12 employees. We just dissolved everything to save his life. So that's how I got into it. I started to recognize, because I was in product development and natural products and pet grooming products. Who would have known, you know? So I realized that this is the only work for me to do at this point. That this silent narrative is something that interrupts our lives from time to time and can really damage relationships or be unclear, you know, have blurred lines between our life, you know, our life with another person or with our work. So, and in the brain, where all of this is processed, so the amygdala is the limbic system in the brain, which processes our emotions and processes trauma, but it also has a storage unit. So it
Yeah.
stores memories, right? So this storage unit can keep a memory or a traumatic event experience put away. And at some point in time in life, it can come back. And that happened to me shortly after I got married.
Okay.
So these memories started coming back. So in the work that I do is I coach and I teach about how to really truly listen to this narrative and how that narrative needs attention. Because just like I say in all of my coaching practices, if something's in front of us, it's there for a reason and it needs our attention. And what I mean by attention is, you know, questioning it, trying to understand it. But in even a greater way is to give awareness to it, bring awareness to the feelings of pain or sorrow or grief. I don't, you know, I mean, people aren't reliving their traumatic experiences, but these triggers are still there. Things that are there that maybe stop us in fear or we're concerned or we're insecure about something. That's the narrative that is continually on repeat. So I developed an interactive and effective kind of communication techniques where um, one-on-one we work with that narrative and really understanding it and just being in that quiet place. The other thing is we hold space for ourselves. We talk a lot about holding space for others. And what I do is I help people to understand how to hold space for themselves and just make these little adjustments each day. They don't have to be big, right? A little awareness, a little listening, like that. And so the results are pretty immediate. It's really easy to do, and it's not anything that you have to change in your life. It's just adding these strategies, so to speak, to help understand what's going on internally and how it's affecting a person externally.
Yeah. Okay. And do you work with a specific group of people? Or is it, you know, anyone who's experienced trauma?
Yeah, I mean, trauma can be anything, right? It even could be you fell off your bike when you were
Yeah.
5 or something, and that's still with you. But I do work with anyone.
Yeah.
I do speak with at conferences, and I speak with caregivers, advocates, mental health advocates, domestic violence advocates, crisis intervention people, some first responders, and medical students. So those people that I teach through NAMI, the National Alliance on Mental Illness, and also some of my own coaching programs. So workshops like that, and so it's very important that the validation that comes from this work and really just looking inside and appreciating oneself, you know, in for that pain or for that sorrow. And so much of what we do in life, and I've had all this lived experience around this, is that we push it away, right? Or we put on a mask or a facade that appears to be one way, like we do on Facebook. You know, so many people say that on Facebook, people's lives look perfect, but they're really not. And so I'm trying to bridge that gap between what that persona is and yet who we really are. And I have found through helping my son, is I had to I asked him in order for him to trust me, what were the voices in his head saying? So I really had to listen to him. And through that process of living with him for all of these years and helping him through every part of his life, taught me that I could do the same thing for myself.
Yeah.
That's when I started to develop these programs and these strategies.
Beautiful.
Thank you. And I call one of them identify and echo. So once we identify what's happening inside of us, we can at least give there's a meaning attached to it. See, we make meaning out of our trauma. And so I help people to understand what that is saying. What meaning are you making out of that? And is there an opening or a potential for that to shift, for it to become, to serve you in another way? Because everything we do, we're serving each other, whether one another, I mean, ourselves, unless positive or negatively. So I look at how that meaning that a person makes out of that, like the stories we tell ourselves about things, that's when we can start shifting the perspective and shifting how we see ourselves and how we see our relationships. And it's all based on acknowledging and validating that things in our life did happen and they were real.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. And, you know, when people are experiencing those voices in their head and seeing things that not everybody else can see, it can be so scary to experience that. And to them, those voices are very real and those visions are very real. And it takes a very skilled and understanding person to be able to navigate that when you're not the person having those visions and voices.
Absolutely. Absolutely. The work I do with the National Alliance on Mental Illness, I'm considered a family peer support person. And what that means is, because I'm a family member who lived and cared for a family member.
Yeah.
And so it's all about education and awareness. And the National Alliance on Mental Illness gives a huge amount of education. So we teach the parents and the caregivers all about these different mental health disorders, all about the medications, all about the treatments, the therapies. And then they can tell their story if they like. We don't, you know, they just go around the room and tell their story. And sometimes it's the first time they've ever said it outside of their family unit about what's happening to their child or their loved one. And it's a huge healing experience. And I think the same about with what you're doing with this book is that you're gathering these women together to really share something that perhaps might be the first time they're sharing it, or they're sharing it in a different way, you know?
Yeah, that's exactly right. And there's something magical that happens in the writing process. I haven't been able to, you know, logically explain it, I guess. But, you know, you do all this work through these different modalities, and you think that you've worked on your trauma or your, you know, your beliefs and things like this. But when it comes to writing it in a format that we're doing inside of Phoenix Rising, it is such a healing and transformational experience. And people don't realize that when they start writing, like, oh yeah, I'm just going to write a chapter in a book and then it's going to X, Y, and Z, you know, and then they start writing and I receive all these messages going, oh my God, this is so much harder than I thought, or, oh, that, you know, I need a bit of time to process this, you know, and where's the support? Can we do this? Can we do that? I'm like, yep, sure, absolutely. And, but on the other side, it's so beautiful. It's like this flower that just blooms inside a person because they've moved past the fear. They've moved and they've found the courage, and they've reignited that inner spark, and they go, I'm amazing. You know, and as a result of all of that, they can further expand out into the world, into the business, into who they are and what they're here to do. And it's just so beautiful to witness. It's probably my number one reason for doing these multi-author book projects. It's just such a joy to watch.
It's such an opportunity to just share with one another, and that's the thing I love most about this. And I added poetry in mine just because that's kind of new for me, and because I'm writing my memoir, and I'm writing chapter after chapter after chapter of all this stuff that happened, right? All this traumatic stuff. And I'm like, is the reader really going to want to read all this detail? So poetry just started pouring out of me about 6 months ago. And I recognized that it was a beautiful vehicle to kind of take all of that prose and turn it into a concise form. that the person can then just, so that's what I did in this chapter. I wrote some things and then I ended it with a poem and like that, just to wrap it up. And yeah, and you know, and the word count is not the largest, but we all manage.
Yeah, yeah. And it's intentional not having a larger word count, because it, for a lot of people, this is their entry point into writing or into being published as an author. And it is a great stepping stone towards your own solo book or series of books, whatever it is. And the reason the word count is so intentional is because it forces the author to really hone in and organize their thoughts on a specific thing. And what gift that will give them as an entrepreneur and as a person is the ability to clearly communicate in a way that hits home. Because otherwise people, you know, I've seen it time and time again, I receive these bios back and I'm like, I don't even understand what you do from reading that. Like, it's all this waffle, you know, and it's like, no, we need to hone in. What is it that you do? And it's like this really sometimes uncomfortable process, but the end result is so potent. It's absolutely worth doing.
Well, your course on that was fabulous.
No, thank you.
You changed my whole bio. My bio was pretty long. Because I have so many different modalities that I've studied over, you know, all these decades. And so, yeah, no, it was very helpful. And it puts everything into perspective in a different way. And I really, really love doing this.
I'm so glad. And what was your favorite part about the whole writing process? What do you think that you either got out of it or enjoyed most?
Well, it's always, you know, I have written I've been in two other, and then I'm writing my memoir and so forth. And I just like the fact that I can safely say this stuff. I can just hear. It's not graphic. It's concise. It's understandable, you know, and hopefully my desire hopefully is it makes an impact or shares some form of healing. I mean, that's my whole thing. I just want, because when we share our stories, we not only help to heal ourselves, but we help to heal others, and we don't even always know that. And that's what I really appreciated about this, is that the women are all similar. Some of the other books I've been in, that wasn't the case. Very different backgrounds and so forth, or at least the focus of the book. So rising from ashes is really something. So that's what I appreciate the most.
Yeah, amazing. And did you want to give us a little bit of a sneak peek about what your chapter is about?
It is about trauma silent narrative, and so I give some short stories about some of the things that I went through and how I understand myself better now. And one of the short stories is about how it affected me physically. And I don't want to give too much away, but it's a hospital visit with a doctor saying certain things, and then I wrote a poem about it. And so that's what, and so I've learned so much, you know, in terms of, it's been years, you know, decades of understanding what's going on and how I fit into the world. Anyone who's had a traumatic experience, that part of life really does get interrupted. You know, my abuse started I was 6 years old. And I had a 10-year-old brother, 10 years older than me, 16, who started doing horrific things. And I was never the same after that. And to acknowledge that, number one, to myself, but anyone who's doing this kind of work, to acknowledge that it really happened and it really hurt and it really did change the trajectory. And so I've spent my lifetime just learning about what really happened and then putting myself back on track, back on the trajectory that I wanted to be on.
Yeah, amazing. What a journey. Thank you so much for being courageous enough to share your story, because it is in the sharing of our real life, you know, true vulnerable stories that people can realize that they're not alone, and that there are people out there who can help and who do understand and who are not going to judge. So it's such a beautiful gift to give people. And if anybody is listening that would like to get support with trauma or anything like that, please reach out to Diana. Her links will be in the comments here, and you can go and find her on her website and have a chat with her. But if you're also listening, you're thinking, oh, I'd like to be part of a magical multi-author book experience similar to Phoenix Rising. Our next multi-author book project, Corporate Dropouts, is now open for applications. It's corporate dropouts from employee to entrepreneur. Meet the entrepreneurs who took the leap and soared. So if you used to work in corporate and you decided that that's kind of a lifestyle wasn't for you, or that you had a burning passion to do something else and you threw it all, threw in the towel on corporate, despite everyone telling you that you might have been a little bit mad, and went out on your own and created a successful, beautiful, thriving business, then this book is absolutely for you. So please reach out via Facebook or the website or anything like that, and find out more information, have a chat and apply. We'd love to have you. Diana, thank you so much for joining me today. It's been an absolute pleasure to talk to you about all things trauma and your journey through all of that. So thank you for being here.
Thank you for having me. It's been a pleasure.
Thank you. Have a wonderful day.
Bye.
Bye.